Humans do have to be humanized, socialized, worked on, and put into words in order to become certifiably humans. And while unlike non human animals, we have proven ourselves particularly adept at genocide and self slaughter, it is of course quite possible to dehumanize people. It is sometimes said, though rarely anymore, that people should study the humanities so as to become more fully human. Philosophical activities are essential because they produce insights which completely shatter and undermine our common perception. Philosophy has a battery of disturbing questions, an unsettled and unsettling set of strategies for enabling what Kohler calls reflection on meaning as a problem rather than a given. In Dialectics of Enlightenment, one of the founding documents of contemporary critical theory, Horkheimer and Adorno write that intellect's true concern is the negation of reification. Reification is a Marxist term designating the way that commodification reduces social relations, ideas, even people to things.
Philosophy is useful to help us understand things we already know, understand them better than we now understand them. Well, what philosophy is the activity of thinking about thinking. According to Jonathan Clerk, the impetus to theory is a desire to understand what one is doing when one is thinking. Colour thinks that a theory, as particularly challenging way of thinking about thinking, is driven by the desire to step outside one's thought, to place it and to understand it, and also by a desire, a possible desire for change, both in the ways of one's thought and in the world our thought engages. Thinking about philosophical writings in terms of desire for change not simply in our own individual modes of cognitions, but in the world itself. It also brings to mind the revolutionary slogan by Karl Marx. Philosophers have only interpreted the world in the various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Whenever we find ourselves doing the business of thinking within an utterly rarefied social order, a current global capitalistic mode of production, for example, a world in which corporate capital has succeeded in penetrating and dominating the very fantasy kernel of our being, chances are mighty high that our common perception of that social order, not to mention of our being, will be pretty much rarefied themselves. And thus, the odds of finding our ways to think or dream or use our imaginations, our critical imaginations, to fight against that order can grow quite dismally slim.
Arguably, our habitual tendency to conceive or understand things as they are in our given human realities as things specifically as commodities to be purchased if only we can afford them, and not as productively human and collectively humanizing process is symptomatic of our pervasive cognitive and effective reification. For are we not commonly encouraged by corporate capital to conceive absolutely everything imaginable in commodified or globally free market term? To perceive ourselves in our very being as primarily and essentially consumer, with or without purchasing power, rather than as subjectively makers of the present, and much less as the citizen of the world, empowered and engendered by the work of our own self-reflective understanding. Philosophy is indeed driven by the desire for change both in ourselves and of the world. So the task of philosophy is to make the present, or better to participate in the radical transformation of the present by negating reification, by working to shatter and undermine our common and congealed perception, particularly the all too common sense view that we ourselves are not the actual and sole producers of the present and future human realities, but customers who passively consume the things as they are, and customers who are well accustomed into taking and buying the world as given. In actively reflecting on meaning as problem, theoretical writing attempts to disrupt or short circuit the production of common sense. Theory must always engage in the critique of common sense or of concepts taken as natural. Theoretical writers, in fact, decline to take any human activity naturally, for as long as one assumes that what one does is natural, it is difficult to gain any understanding of it. Theoretical writings offer us the opportunity to reflect not only on the comprehensible meaning, but the very convention of comprehension that make meaning itself possible. Ceaselessly questioning what it means to mean, theory provocatively and perversely encourages us to challenge the categories we use making sense of things. Theory encourages such inquiry even if it involves the risk of comprehensive failure, of losing certainty, of losing clarity to which we are so much accustomed, the ways in which we have normally been trained. I repeat the word encourage here because I believe it requires something like courage to go against one's training, to risk losing or disrupting one's ability to make sense in one's accustomed or inherited or tribal ways. But what makes the risk worth taking is the possibility of discovering new and different ways of making sense of things, of the world, of the text, of oneself, of one's life in this unprocessable process.